Ready to roll? Inshallah. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. طيب، بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. الحمد لله, alhamdulillah. We are, inshallah, going to be starting Ramadan very soon. And one of the things that it's part of our routine that we always prepare for any big event that comes up. Any big celebration, occasion, we always plan way ahead of time. And inshallah, this Ramadan workshop is about preparing yourself, inshallah, for this blessed month of Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask Him to allow us to be in this month and to take the most of it, and to benefit from all the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send in this world upon all the people who worship Him. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So, I just want to give you a quick overview of how this workshop is going to occur in the next 2.5 or plus hours. We will talk about basically 2 dimensions of fasting in Ramadan in particular. One is the inward aspect of Ramadan, because fasting is not just about, as we will talk later, about just staying away from food and drink and call it a day. It's more to it than just doing the above and a lot more. So we will talk about the spiritual aspect of it. So I said spiritual ascension. So we are spiritually going to be uplifted and ascending, inshallah, to a better state, to a higher state, inshallah. So we'll talk about that first, because I think the inward aspect of fasting is very, very important. So we'll cover that, inshallah. And some of those elements will also follow, because it's connected to the outward aspect of fasting. So that will follow on the second part, which is the outward dimensions. And that's all about the rulings of Ramadan and what you need to know about Ramadan. Also, we will talk about then the i'tikaf, which is also related to Ramadan, and subsequently sadaqatul fitr, the zakah that we pay for the month of Ramadan. We will not discuss the zakatul mal, which is the annual zakat that we pay on our wealth, because it's, number one, is not related to Ramadan necessarily, and also it could occur any time of the year, and for the second reason is that zakatul mal, those discussions are pretty lengthy and we will not have enough time to cover those. So we will just cover what is actually related to Ramadan. And inshallah, hopefully we could do a separate session for zakat al-mal, as a lot of us give our zakat and take out our zakat in the month of Ramadan. So inshallah, if whenever we have time in the upcoming weeks, or perhaps maybe during Ramadan, we could do a workshop on that. I used to previously include that chapter in here as well, but it used to always become very lengthy and a lot of things were go very quickly and a lot of questions go unanswered. So inshallah we'll go into first the spiritual aspect of the month of Ramadan. So I took a lot of these things from Imam Ghazali's book Ihya Ulumuddin. And Imam Ghazali, he is Hujjat al-Islam. He is one of the proofs of Islam. and he wrote a lot about the inner dimensions of our ibadat, of our rituals that we do, that includes prayer and fasting and hajj and so on and so forth. And of course, then he has all the other chapters on different aspects of our, path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He kind of structures a whole system and practical lessons that how a person should take the path that leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually. So it's not a very lengthy chapter on fasting, so I tried to summarize it in a few points. So one of the things that he mentions as the first point that I will mention, and it's something for us to kind of take in, and I think this is kind of like the milestone for fasting, or for these things that we're going to talk about in this particular part of this workshop. So he says that there are 3 levels of people who fast. There are 3 levels of people who fast the month of Ramadan or fast any other days outside of Ramadan. So he says the first level is the ordinary people, the ordinary fasting, and that's called Sawmul Awam, right? Or the Sawmul Umam, ordinary people who fast. So what they fast from just the physical aspect of it that we're going to talk about in the second part of this workshop. So they think that fasting is staying away from food and drink and other things that you're not supposed to be doing, and they're happy with that, they're content with that, and inshallah their fast is going to be accepted and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them as well. But it's kind of like the routine, day job that you do. There's no promotion. There's no sense of, getting to the next step and going up the chain and becoming, better at what you do. It's just the routine things that you just keep doing. So that's the ordinary fasting. And then there's the higher level of fasting. So these are the special people, the khawas, he calls them the khawas, the special people's fasting. And the Sawmul Khawas is, they do the same as the first category, but they also spiritually fast from invisible things, like fasting from the eyes, the ears, and we will talk about that inshallah in the next couple points. That fasting is not just about staying away from it. We all know that. But fasting is also making sure that your eyes are used properly, your tongue in particular is used properly. You're not saying things or not hearing things that is impermissible. So protecting all these senses, right? Protecting yourself, protecting the mind, protecting the heart. So a lot of us actually aspire to do that, and we try to. And we always talk about these things, and hopefully that inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow us to get to that point where we can fast not only from the physical perspective, but also from the spiritual perspective. So he says that that's the middle tier. So there are a few of them. The masses are the first category, and the second is a very few and kind of like the elite. But then there's another level above that. There's another level above that. And this is the elite of the elite. So he says the Sawm Khawasul Khawas. The Sawm of the elite of the elite. And those are the people who fast from everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's very difficult. And they become in the level of even higher than the angelical or the spiritual realm, the celestial realm of the angels. They don't eat and drink. They stay on one level, right? And they're always devoted themselves to what they do, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever things that they're ordered to do. But they stay in one level. The elite of the elite are the prophets and those pious people who, when they fast from everything other than Allah. So they don't engage in anything that distracts them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, what is the main purpose of fasting is, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. We won't talk about that now. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So they get the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the awareness of Allah. That's taqwa, right? So they are on the highest level of that taqwa, that they're always focused on Allah. They're always connected with Allah. They're disconnected from everything else. And that's a very difficult stage to be. You want to aspire to be there, and that's why he mentions that. So inshallah, hopefully that we can be connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in even avoiding thoughts that distract us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those are the three categories. All of them by the fuqaha, by the scholars of the outward, what they call fuqaha. Those who will tell you, okay, this thing, it breaks your fast and this thing is okay to do. That's the scholars of the outward, the sharia, right? They give you the rulings, that's sharia. And then there's the scholars of the inward, they're called the scholars of the tariqah. They guide you and they spiritually give you a path and guide you to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the fruit of the first. So we don't eat and drink and we don't, and we do these things. What is the outcome? If it's just habitual things that we do it as a habit, or just because everybody does it, or because I'm a Muslim and I have to do, otherwise I'm going to hell, right? Then you're still on that first level. But the scholars of the inward, which is the aspect of the Prophet ﷺ as he came to the people to teach them what? بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. That he teaches them the recitation of the Quran. He recites to them the verses of the Quran. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. The second part is that he purifies them from zakah, right? Zakat is also purifying the wealth. How you purify your inward, that's tazkiyah. So you zakihim. So the scholars who specialize in this tazkiyah part, they are the inward scholars, the scholars of the inward. And then يُعَلِّمْهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. They give them the teaching of the rulings. So those are the scholars of the outward, the scholars of the rulings, the fuqaha, right? Al-hikmah, wisdom. So wisdom, some of the mufassirun say it's sunnah, meaning following the Prophet ﷺ. So from the aspect of the second category of the responsibility of a prophet is the scholars of the inward, the scholars of tazkiyah, the scholars of tariqah, the scholars that will help someone through their prayer, through their acts of worship, through their abstaining from certain sins and prohibitions, is to guide them and navigate them through all of that and to get the fruit out of it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us that we gain knowledge and also we get the fruit from that knowledge. So, and the second point, purification of the heart. So fasting is a means of subordinating the desires of the soul, of the nafs, suppressing your nafs, right? Which is often inclined toward sin. Inna nafsa la'ammaratun bisu, right? So it's like a horse that is untrained. So when you train the horse, you put a rein on it and you strap it and you train it, and then it does. Otherwise, if it's untrained, what does the horse do? It just jumps around and doesn't want to listen. You tell it to do it, it doesn't want to. So they have to train a horse. A horse is not by default ready to have someone ride it and go. So your nafs, your inner self, your caprice, is your nafs, is your ego, is your lower self, that you have to train it. So fasting actually trains yourself by, okay, you cannot eat now. You cannot do this now. You want to do it? No, I won't. I cannot. Right? So suppressing yourself. And fasting is unique because it is a private act. It's an act. It's one of those acts of worship that you cannot show off. You cannot display to people unless you tell someone. And that's why it's very interesting that if you look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "As-sawmu li," that Allah says, hadith al-Qudsi, that Allah says that the fasting is for me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the unseen. He's a knower of the unseen, and also He is in the unseen. We do not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically with our physical eyes. We cannot. So we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the unseen one entity, and our fasting is also kind of hidden. So then the reward of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am going to be the reward for that. وَأَنَا أُجْزَى بِهِ, according to one narration, variation of the hadith, is that some of the scholars say that وَأَنَا أَجْزِي, instead of أَجْزِي, that I give the reward. I am the reward for that. It's like the king says, if you do such and such, I'm going to give you, this is your prize. Versus the king says, if you do such and such, I am your reward. Right? If you get the king, then you got everything. But if you get an item, then there's a limitation to that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنَا أُجْزَى بِهِ, I will be the reward. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you in a way that you cannot comprehend. And of course, when it's hidden, then there's a sense of sincerity, ikhlas, a sense of sincerity, that you do it only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why man qama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban. Whoever stands on the day of in Ramadan with faith and conviction that the reward that Allah has promised, غُفِرَ لَهُ, Allah will forgive all of his sins. All of his sins, because he has faith in the unseen, and he's fasting for Allah, and he's fasting in a way that it does not have any show-off aspect to it, right? So you're doing it only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a way you can show off. You can say, hey, come on, we're fasting here, People get angry. Can't you see I'm fasting? You only say that when someone wants to fight with you. The Prophet ﷺ said that when someone wants to fight and be harsh and wants to become verbally harsh and loud, if you have to reply, just say, I'm fasting. I'm fasting from replying to you. I'm fasting from doing what you're doing. Right? The third point, the true purpose of fasting. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ. I think I covered that a little bit. The ultimate goal is to develop taqwa, God consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as mentioned in Surah Baqarah that we all hear. So a person who's fasting should increase in humility, right? Reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than just hunger and thirst and becoming like, why does Allah have to force me to do this, right? To do it with joy and happiness. Avoiding sin while fasting. So like we mentioned in the first point, that the fasting of the elite, of the khawas, are those people who not only fast from food and drink and other things that are prohibited during fasting, but they also stay away from other sins, because the faculties that take in effects are our senses, our eyes, our ears, our tongue. So the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith to that effect that مَنْ لَمْ يَدَعْ قَوْلَ الزُّورِ وَالْعَمَلَ بِهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. That if someone is fasting and he doesn't eat and drink, but he doesn't stop lying, doesn't stop acting upon it, or any of those sins that are, this is like one category that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, but any kind of sins that a person does not abstain from, then Allah does not need your hunger. Allah is not in need of anything that we do. But in this case in particular, Allah does not want us to go hungry and do other things that it's like running this heat at 80 degrees and then opening up all the doors. Right? For those people who pay their bills, like dads in particular, they always, thermostat in the house is like the most sacred thing. Don't touch that thermostat, right? Because you're wasting energy if you're running it too high and the windows are open or whatever. So likewise, if a person is fasting, he's like he has turned on the heat. But now he's doing other things, means he has opened all the windows and all that heat is just being wasted. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to fast the month of Ramadan with avoiding sins. And the angelical imitation. I mentioned in the beginning that when a person is fasting, a person is staying away from eating and drinking. So there's a spiritual aspect of it that sometimes you feel low, you feel hungry, and you feel a little weak because you're fasting. But subhanAllah, I'm sure all of you have experienced this, that in fasting there is a different type of energy that you feel that just pushes you in a very different way, right? It's like that boat that has, those heavy motors, makes a huge noise, and then you have a very silent one when they go fishing because they don't want to scare the fishes away. So it's a very quiet motor, but it's propelling and it's pushing the boat forward. So that's your spiritual energy that keeps you going, and you feel actually more energetic because it's spiritual. It's a spiritual energy that you don't get from these. You get it from engaging in ibadah, right? And therefore, in particular, once Ramadan starts, you feel less urge to actually eat. You feel hungry and you want to that smell smells so good. But the urge, it just goes down. And for also sleep. This is the blessing of Ramadan. This is a Ramadan Mubarak. Allah has put barakah. In the little that you do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in it. So you get to a higher level. And that's why we'll talk about also the iftar and suhoor. We shouldn't stuff ourselves. We should eat moderately, just like you would eat any meal. Because sometimes it happens that, eat a lot in suhoor because you're fasting the whole day. And then in iftar, since we haven't eaten the whole day, go right at it. And then after that, since we only did iftar, right, we didn't have the night meal, so we need to also go hard because we were fasting, of course, all day. So sometimes it happens that we eat actually more in the month of Ramadan than outside of Ramadan. And the variety, don't even talk about that, of stuff that we have, mashallah, in some of our homes. So to kind of reduce that food, if you are fasting and then after, even outside of the fasting time, in the morning and in the evening, try to be moderate. Eat just enough that it will, 1/3 as the sunnah, right? In many places I've seen that they do iftar very light, and then that's it. And then they get ready to do ibadah from Maghrib till Isha. And then after Isha, of course, Isha and then Taraweeh, and they attend one Taraweeh and then they go to the next one because that's a little longer, so they go to that one. And then maybe there's a third one, let's go to that one. They spend most of the night like that. And then suhoor, because it's sunnah, and we'll discuss that tasahharu, the Prophet ﷺ said that eat suhoor because there's barakah in it. So they will then have like a festive kind of suhoor. They will invite guests, they will invite people to their homes, invite people to places, and they'll have suhoor. So suhoor is one of the sunnah, the food that you should eat. You should have something If you are working like evening hours and you're unable to have a proper meal, at least have something before starting your fasting. So you want to get to that level of the spiritual realm, the highest celestial realm, where the angels are. So inshallah, then you will observe things. You'll observe, get closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by your fasting. Now, breaking the fast with gratitude. So that's the second part of what I just mentioned. That having iftar, you don't have to eat too much. Keep it light. I'm not going to talk about all the spicy and oily stuff that you want to eat. That's up to you, whatever your preference is. And finally, the reward of fasting. The Prophet ﷺ said that كل عمل ابن آدم له إلا الصيام فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. This hadith is mentioned in Bukhari and Muslim, that every action of the son of Adam is for him. What does that mean? That there is a sense of owning it and sense of kind of a physical aspect to it, that you do something, right? And except for fasting, that is only between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so the reward is also hidden. Like I mentioned before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the reward. And it's partially Jannah. You know, for every good deed there is Jannah, right? Because fasting is sabr, is patience. وَالصَّبْرُ لَيْسَ لَهُ جَزَاءٌ إِلَّا الْجَنَّةِ. And for patience, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised Jannah. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. So, Jannah is just the partial reward of fasting. The biggest reward is that you get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's nothing greater than that, right? And that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the believers, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ, all the way to وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, that Allah has promised the believers, men and women, جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَمَسَاكِنَ طَيِّبَةً فِي جَنَّاتِ عَدْنٍ. That all of these things about paradise and all the things that and how long and all that, after all of that Allah mentions, He says, وَرِضْوَانُ مِنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. That the pleasure of God is the greatest of all. Right? So that kind of concludes the first aspect of this workshop, the inner dimension, the spiritual aspect of fasting, and what's the outcome of it. So inshallah, hopefully that we can practice some of these points, inshallah, as the month of Ramadan starts. Okay, so now we are going into the lesser fun part. Talk about the rulings, okay? There's a lot of detail to it, so that's why we spend a lot of time in that. Inshallah, the spiritual aspect of fasting, that's something that you will always be learning, and there's always like new things that come up. Always try to consult someone who's a knowledgeable person, who's a scholar. I'm around if you are in this community, inshallah. I'm happy to help and answer any questions, but it's good to know the details before starting the fast. So we will talk about everything related to fasting, the month of Ramadan in particular. So, Bismillah. So first we will talk about the definition in general, because there's a lot of things in this definition. Fasting in general, people know that, right? A lot of people do fast. A lot of people who fast, they just don't eat certain things or drink certain things, and they fast from that. So, and some people fast. They don't have any solids. They only use liquids, and so on and so forth. So people have different definitions of fasting. Now, from the Sharia perspective, because now we're taking points from the scholars of the outward, the fuqaha, the scholars who will tell us the do's and don'ts. So how do they define fasting? So fasting is to abstain from during the day from allowing anything into the stomach through the mouth, nose, whether intentionally or by mistake. In addition, fasting is to abstain from sexual gratification in unison with intention of fasting. So that's the fifth. Equally, this abstinence is to refrain for a person who fits the criteria of fasting, such as being a Muslim, sane, mature, and free from menstrual bleeding and postnatal bleeding. Now, this is a lot into it. Now, let's break this down to what exactly this looks like in different points. So, the number one, refraining from engaging in sexual activity, right? And then refraining from entering anything into the body cavity, food, drink, etc., medication, right? All of those things. Anything that nourishes the body or medicates the body. Okay, so that's two. Whether deliberately or accidentally, meaning that you have to abstain from the prohibitions of fasting, and it cannot be done intentionally or accidentally. So accidentally, deliberately, we all know that someone deliberately knows they're fasting and they drink water, right? Accidentally is that you know you're fasting, but you started gargling, and then accidentally water went down your throat. That's also going to break your fast, so that's contrary to fast. From the time of sunset, the break of dawn, so it says sun begins to rise. So when it begins to rise, that's the disk of the sun is at 15 to 18 degrees below the horizon, right? So that's the beginning of the sunrise. It didn't rise yet. And that's the time until, from the time of Fajr enters until sunrise. So that's like 15 to 18 degrees below. So once you see that light, meaning that once Fajr enters, that's the time when it starts, and it goes all the way until sunset. And then the second last is that it is accompanied with the intention. So a person has to, even if he does all the above and abstains from all the above, and he has no intention, it just happens so he didn't eat and drink and never had, whatever, for the whole entire day, it wouldn't count. So intention is important. So we'll talk about that as well in detail. From individuals who are permitted to fast. From individuals that are permitted to fast. Permitted to fast meaning that if someone is in their periods, they cannot fast. Even if they want to fast, it will not count. Right? Now let's look at some of the other aspects of fasting. So the cause which makes fasting an obligation is the presence of Ramadan. And each day it will be the cause for that person to fast. So let's say, in a more practical sense, if someone became a Muslim, converted to Islam in the middle of Ramadan, the first half, this person was not required to fast because we said that the person has to be a Muslim, has to be sane, and nothing contrary to fasting. So it means that person does not have to fast those first 15 days that they missed because they were not obligated to fast. Someone who, that would be the most practical example. There are other examples, but inshallah we'll move on from that. So that's the cause. The month of Ramadan has to be present. So if someone wants to fast in another month, say that, this is going to be my Ramadan, you're missing out on the main cause, which makes the fasting an obligation. So, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about the month of Ramadan. And that's the verse that makes it obligating to us. That's the ruling. So it's fard. Why? Kutiba. The word kutiba, that's where the scholars of the fuqaha, they say that this word indicates to being an obligation. It's not like you can fast, right? He says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ, that is prescribed to you, it became mandatory upon you. And it was also given to the people before you, so you're not unique in that. The people before you also used to fast. Okay, so then now let's break down the conditions that render the obligatory, the shurut al-iftirad. Right, there's shurut al-sihha, the conditions that make it obligation, the conditions that make it, render it permissible to do. Right, so we'll talk about that later. So the first one is that when it becomes fard, the person, when he is a Muslim, or he or she, sanity, sane, maturity, to have knowledge what is an obligatory act, that a person knows about that. If a person never knew that he was supposed to fast, then he or she is not required to fast, which is very difficult in this time, the day and age. But if someone never knew about it, they're not obligated to make up those fasts. Now, the conditions that, if it becomes fard, is it obligated on this person now to fast? Because you could be obligated, but maybe you're not obligated now. Okay? So, free from ill health, right? If a person is sick, they're obligated to fast because the first two conditions that person already met. However, at this point, like for this day, this person does not have to fast. Right? Traveler, postnatal bleeding, menstrual periods. In these four conditions, you're not obligated to fast. However, the first two, if someone wants to fast, they can. And for the last two, it's not even permissible to fast. So those are the slight differences between the first two and the second two. Okay. So if someone is a sick person, they want to fast, even though it's very difficult, they can. Someone who's traveling and wants to fast, they can still fast. Now, the intention to be free from anything that is contrary to fasting, and to be free from things that break the fast, that would make it permissible, meaning it will validate the fasting of that month. So it's another way of saying these are the conditions of fasting itself. The types of fasts that we're not going to go through all of them in detail, but just to put that out there, that there are fard, obligated fasting, that is Ramadan. Necessary fasting, like for example, someone says that if I get into this college, right, I'm going to fast 3 days. So that's nadar, so that's wajib. And then sunnah is the fasting of the Ashura and so on and so forth, those famous days that we know that we fast. The recommended mandub are the fasting the Mondays and Thursdays and those days. And then voluntary fast. Someone just wants to fast, that will include also those days. But any other day, person just wants to fast. Someone wants to do Sawm Dawood, alayhi salam. Right, fast one day and not fast one day. And then there's dislike fasting. And then there's heavily dislike fasting. So the minor dislike fasting is like fasting on singling out Friday to fast. Some scholars say that that doesn't matter anymore because back in the day, Friday is a special day, right? And there is a special salah that we pray in congregation, and we're obligated to go and pray for men, not for women. Now, if someone is fasting, that could lead to kind of laziness and not being able to go for Jum'ah. And that's why, and before they used to have always in all the Muslim world, there was always a big Masjid al-Jami', and all the people come to that one masjid from even far distance. So sometimes they have to walk, sometimes ride a camel or whatever, a horse. So it's a lot of work and effort to get to them for Jum'ah. So that's why it's minorly disliked. If someone is able to fast and wants to fast, they can fast. And the very disliked would be fasting on the day of Eid, on both Eid days and the 3 days after Eid al-Adha. The 3 days after the day of Eid al-Adha. So that's, those are the different types. So we're going to focus, inshallah, on the first category. I'm going to quickly just go through all of this and skip to actions that invalidate the fast. So there are 2 categories in this. That what are the things that you should not do, and if you do it, it will break your fast. There are 2 categories. One is that it will break the fast, but the penalty is actually very high. It's a high price to pay. And that will be, the header would be with red color, so I put it in red, so kind of, it's a no-no. And then the next one is that will break the fast, and you have to make up for it, of course. Any fast that you break, you have to make it up. However, there is no any penalty other than that. So it invalidates the fast, but it does not require any expiation, which we call in Arabic kafara. Kafara. So acts that invalidate the fast and require a makeup and expiation are acts, so it has to be the current Ramadan. So if someone does any of those that break the fast and fulfills the conditions, but it's not a Ramadan fast. It's not even a current Ramadan fast. So if someone's doing a qada and any of these things occur, still doesn't count. And by one's own free will, right? If someone forced you to eat, right? That would not count. Or any of the things that we'll mention later that involves eating and drinking, but it only requires a makeup and no expiation. So free will without a valid reason while fasting in the current Ramadan fast. Okay? So eating or drinking, something that humans would normally consume, and the consumption nourishes the body or medicates the body. Right? So taking medication deliberately in a Ramadan, that would break the fast and also require an expiation, a kafara. And anything that is perhaps maybe not a regular meal, but it's something that will nourish the body, like nuts. It's not a meal, but it's from the category of food in general. So anything that nourishes the body or medicates the body. So, but if someone took a leaf and ate it, that's nor from medication or nourishment, so that will break the fast. However, it will not require a kafara. None. And the second will be actual sexual intercourse. Okay? And swallowing the saliva of one spouse. So those are the 2 categories that fall into that one category of sexual relationship. That will require, if it was current Ramadan, if it was by free will, and it was, of course, there cannot be any reason, valid reason is only with food and drink, right? So that will not, but if it was done in outside of Ramadan or any other fasting, and not by free will, by mistake, then we'll talk about that later. But you have to keep those 3 conditions in mind. So the expiation is fasting 2 months consecutively, and if one cannot do that, then a person can feed 60 people, 60 people, 60 poor people, or feed one poor person 60 meals. So that's the breakdown. So feed the same 60, feed one poor person for 60 days, or give 60 poor people, or one poor person the 60 days of amount of sadaqat al-fitr. So that's the easiest one to do. And that's what normally people do. So sadaqat al-fitr right now, it's about $15. So if someone cannot do fasting, cannot do those 60 days, then the person can do sadaqat al-fitr for 60 times. So 60 times 150, 60 times 15 is what? No? 900. So $900. There's a hadith there was a famous hadith where the companion, it happened, he had a relationship with his wife and came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I messed up. The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, you're going to have to fast 2 months after the month of Ramadan, 60 consecutive days, mutatabi'een. He said, I could barely get through one day. You want me to fast another 60 days? So the Prophet ﷺ said, what else you can do? Feed 60 poor people. He said, I'm broke. I don't have any money. How can I feed so many people? The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, just take a basket of dates and give that in charity. He says, yeah, so I'm the poorest person here in the area. Can I have it for myself? He said, take it. So that was an exception for this companion. It was an exception for him, and that will not apply to anyone else. That's the consensus of the scholars. So however, that fasting, and if the person cannot do that for whatever reason, then he can feed 60 people. So that's the kafara, the expiation. Acts that, now we're going to go to the second category, acts that invalidate the fast, of course is going to require a makeup. A rule of thumb, any fast that you break, regardless of the nature of that fasting, you have to make up that fast. So you start a nafli fasting, and then he said, you know what? I don't think it was a good idea to fast today. I'm just going to break it. And you have to make up that day. And the scholars, the fuqaha, take this ruling from the verse of the Quran, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا أَعْمَالَكُمْ. And that will actually apply to nafli prayers as well. Once you start a prayer, you start a fasting, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Do not nullify your acts. So if you broke it, because you were not obligated to pray, but since you already started it, you're obligated to complete it. And if you're unable to, you can break it, but you have to make it up later. So they do not require an expiation. So eating or drinking accidentally while remembering the fast. So I gave you the example of gargling. You knew you were fasting, but that's why it's disliked to gargle during Ramadan, because that could happen, that water goes down your throat. Your fasting is done. Okay? And then eating or drinking because one thought Maghrib entered, but Maghrib did not enter. So that's deliberately, but in a sense that it was a mistake. It was mistakenly broke the fast. So there's a deliberate, there is accidentally breaking the fast, and then there is by mistake. So a person thought that it was Maghrib and started eating, the fast broke because you started eating before sunset. You have to make up that day, but there's no expiation. Eating or drinking because doubted, as a contrary, the opposite of Maghrib, someone kept on eating until Fajr entered, right? Eating or drinking forgetfully, and thereafter thinking that the fast broken, and then went back and started eating. Because if someone ate or drank during fasting, during any fasting, but that person didn't remember was fasting, then as the Prophet ﷺ made that not an exception, he made it for everyone. That إِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَكَ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاكَ, that Allah has fed you and gave you to drink. A lot of people say that. Why I never get that blessing of forgetting and eating and drinking, and then after that, oh, mashallah, Allah gave me food. Alhamdulillah. But if that happens and the person doesn't know that this is the ruling, that you're still fasting, and starts eating and drinking, that's a mistake. So therefore, that will not require an expiation, but it will, of course, like I mentioned, a rule of thumb that you always have to make up a fast that you broke. Swallowing what is between the teeth on the condition that is the size of a chickpea or bigger. So something that after suhoor, something that remained in your mouth, and then you swallow it after the time entered. Right? So it's different than eating or taking something from external and entering in the body cavity, as we talked about it in the definition. This is like already in your mouth before the fasting started, and now you swallowed it, so it will break the fast. It will break the fast. However, anything smaller than that, like a very small, piece of meat or whatever, was stuck between your teeth and you swallow it, the fast is still valid. However, if it's large, if it's substantial, like a chickpea size, that's quite big, that will break the fast. Swallowing a pebble, right? Right? Swallowing water by accident. We already talked about that. Swallowing blood that exists from the gums, right? And that's something that maybe you be careful when you brush your teeth or, rinse your mouth pretty hard. And people sometimes have gum issues and where they bleed a lot. So they have to be careful. That make sure that if they're washing and rinsing the mouth or brushing their teeth, that it's not bleeding while they're fasting and that goes down the throat. So that will break the fast if it's also, again, substantial. And how do you differentiate between substantial and very little? Is that if you spit out and you can actually see blood, right, there's very strong presence there, then that will break the fast, to swallow that kind of a saliva. But if it's very light, it's just very mild, pinkish, reddish, it's not very strong presence in the saliva, then that will be okay. It will not break the fast. Swallowing toothpaste, of course. And that's why to use toothpaste, it's kind of an arguably one of the issues that some scholars say that it is okay to use it if you are working in a place where you're in close proximity to people and you're discussing and you don't want to have a bad breath. But however, it will be disliked to use toothpaste for no reason, just to feel better, right? And that's why according to the Shafi'i school, miswak is also disliked to use in the end of the day, like in the second half of the day, because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, خَلُوفَ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ, that the smell of the mouth, in terms of the alim al-ghayb, right, is more beloved to Allah than the smell of musk, because of the person being hungry, right, and going through that difficulty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that act, that He's doing it for me, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards that person and makes it very special. Deliberately swallowing vomit that reaches the mouthful. So sometimes, mashallah, when you have a good suhoor, right, if you run or do any exercise, sometimes it kind of comes up a little bit. So if it's a mouthful, that's a lot. Someone swallows that, then that will break the fast. But if a little bit comes up and goes back down, it will not break the fast. Because sometimes you just feel it in your throat and you have no control over it. So deliberately vomiting a mouthful, so it is different. This is a different ruling, that someone deliberately vomits and it's a mouthful, and nothing went back down. It just all came out. Someone deliberately vomits, right? So vomiting deliberately, mouthful, and a person, even if he doesn't swallow it, then that will also break the fast. But if someone was sick to the stomach and just vomit everything out without forcing themselves to vomit, then that does not break the fast. Vomiting on their own, it does not break the fast, no matter how much the amount is. Vomiting and then thinking, because there was a case that I saw someone doing this. They got sick and they were vomiting, and they said, "Oh man, I broke my fast. Let me take this medication." And I said, "No, your fast is not broken. It's still valid because you didn't do it on purpose." So, but if someone thought that it's already over, and they started taking medication or started eating and drinking, then of course their fast is broken. But there's no expiation because of, what is it? By mistake, right? It was by mistake. And then you have the last one. For the adults who are here, inshallah, I will move on to the next one. Smoke. Oh, good catch. Smoke. Did someone put some incense on? Right, you can smell it. That's okay. That's okay if you're fasting. However, if you have that incense right next to you, or the bakhur that you're burning, right? A lot of the Arab world, they accustomed to burn a lot of that stuff. And then you take it, and if it goes through that will break the fast. But anything that is mild, that is, you cannot prevent it from happening, like you walking and someone is smoking next to you, right? I think now it's much better because people now cannot smoke in buildings, right? In most places. Cannot smoke in train and plane and other places, alhamdulillah. But in a case where you're standing and someone is smoking next to you, your fast is still valid. But inhaling smoke purposefully, that will break the fast. And anything that is related to that. That's fine. You can. As long as it's not next to you and you're not inhaling it. But deliberately putting it right next to you and then if you inhale it, then that's deliberate. So that will break the fast. You just have to be careful. Anything that... If you inhale the smoke. No, smoke. So anything that enters the body, that will break the fast. What nourishes the body and doesn't nourish the body, that has to do with expiation, kafara. But anything, because what we said in the beginning, the definition of fasting, is prevent from anything going into the body cavity. Through the mouth, nose, throat, right? So smoke is also something that went through the body, so that will invalidate the fast. Like anything else. Now, what is going to make it to make you make up, to do a make-up, do a qada, and a kafara? We already talked about that, the separation. What would necessitate a kafara, those are just few situations, and the rest is just a make-up, qada. Inshallah. I like, mashallah, questions. If you have any questions, on the spot, please do ask, inshallah. Keep it more engaging, inshallah. Engaging in sexual intercourse, because one still thinks Fajr has not entered, but it really did enter, right? So doing anything that is contrary to fast, thinking that it did not, the fasting has not started, or thinking that the fast has ended. So just like we talk about food, it also applies to any other thing that is contrary to fasting. And it goes the same way, the way how we talked about food. right? So all of those things that have to do with sexual relationship, all of those things, which ones that do not require a kafara and just a makeup, all of those are listed here. So entering something wet or dried into the body cavity, so that's any parts of the body, any opening of the body, that's in general. That will break the fast. So for any medication reason, if you have to go to the doctor and they enter something and, you know, any liquid or anything, or even just do an examination with any instrument through the private part, that will break the fast. And this is more in particular for women. And by the way, you know, if any of the sisters have any particular question, especially related to some of these issues, you can, inshallah, contact my wife, Salma. Inshallah, she will be happy to answer any of these questions. So if you are going to those kind of, you know, for a checkup or something like that, you just have to make sure that you know these rulings and what will break the fast and what will not. If anything that is necessary and it's kind of urgent, then of course, then you're excused. But if you can delay it for after fast, that would be the ideal situation. Right. So it will break the fast. Asthma inhalers. What are the other? Yeah, firm mist. Any of those things that have a component of steam or medication that goes through your throat, it will break the fast. Yes.
What about dental cleaning?
That's fine. As long as it doesn't pass and goes through down the throat, that's fine. So that any dental treatment, even going to a dentist and having, you know, the treatment done or regular hygiene cleaning, it will be permissible, but it will be disliked because there is a chance that something would go down because the way how they make you lay down, and you know, I try my best to just hold my breath also. It's a torture. Yes. Humidifier is fine because it's very minimal, very minimal. It's like almost like nothing. So it's very minimal, so that will be fine. Yeah. A little more elaboration on that, if you don't mind. So I think a lot of those things are coming up. So it's kind of like mentioned in the first 4 or 5 of them.
For people taking insulin.
Insulin is fine.
Yeah, insulin is fine.
Fine.
So sometimes they have to take it before they break their fasting, like an hour before they take it.
It doesn't matter. Anytime during the fasting they can take. Anything, so it's coming up, inshallah, in the things that are permissible. Anything that you inject into the body, right? Anything that you inject, regardless of the reason, it does not break the fast. Anything. So that includes insulin, includes any other IV.
If they inject something, give you like food.
Even if it's for nourishment, you can still do it. Yeah. Just like drawing blood is also permissible. Hajam is permissible. So we'll talk about that, inshallah, it's coming up. I just need to make sure that we get through everything. So pouring water or oil into a private part, of course. Anything that enters them is called the hukna. So all of those things will nullify the fasting. Okay, and then the nose. So any water that you put in the nose, it doesn't matter. Anything that you put into the nose, it doesn't matter. As long as it doesn't, because your nose and ears and throat are connected somewhat. So I think on the ears, okay, let's stay here. On the ears, if you put oil or any other thing, any other liquid, the latest, I don't know, there's many professions there. Anyone from anyone who's a doctor or in that profession. From what I know, from what I've asked many doctors and many what do you call it? The ENT, ears, nose, throat. Yeah, ENTs. They said that if you put any liquid, it does not go to the throat. It does not go down the throat, in general. Right? So that's why, if you look at the old fuqaha, the older fatawas, they say that if you put oil in your ear, it will break a fast. But a lot of contemporary scholars said that it does not break the fast.
Even if you feel it in the throat, when you put the
sometimes you can feel it in your throat, just like rubbing something on your throat, and you can actually sometimes taste it. And sometimes you put an eye drop. This is very true. Some eye drops, you actually can taste it. But because they're not related, it does not break the fast. Like certain, not alcohol, but the kuhl, right, the surma, that you put in the eye, like the ithmad, the red one, sometimes you can actually taste it. So it's permissible. Yeah. So anything that he put, but if you sniff water, because they are connected through the nostrils, then if it's really hard and you can feel it, then that will break the fast. It has to reach the throat. And also inhaling medicine, okay, inhaling smoke, we already talked about that. Is all good? I think someone had their hand raised, yes.
I was just going to clarify that if you put something to the ear, it normally doesn't go to the throat unless your rough is ruptured. But if you put something in your eye, with the chest, that can go.
That's the new,
Generally,
the new discovery. It's a very, very minor, I believe. There's definitely a connection there, and that's why you feel it sometimes. But I have never come across any scholar say that that would invalidate the fast. So we'll just go with it. Anything that you put it in your eyes is totally fine. If you have a stuffy nose and you use that, I don't know. If it only stays within the nostril and does not pass down to the throat, that's the rule of thumb, right? As long as it doesn't go down to the throat, it's okay. So, I don't know. Probably not, right? Probably not?
Yeah, but it goes, it's a little bit down, right?
Okay. Yeah, if it's pressure, then yeah, obviously it's going to go down. But if it just stays up there, then it's fine. There's this other Vicks, it looks like a bullet. You kind of hold it in one and you kind of inhale it. So none of the substance actually goes into the nostril, it's just the smell of it goes and kind of opens up. So that would be fine. It has to be substantial. Something of substance has to go down. Just smelling, like putting on an attar or perfume, smells good. Maybe even make you feel better. But it's okay during fasting. Yeah. Because that's smoke. It's there's something that is going down. Fragrance is not, it's invisible. Right? It's not a substance that you take. Yes. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think somewhere it's going to come up somewhere. But yeah, that's the rule of thumb, that if you are in a state where you are required to fast and you are able to fast. You are required to fast and able to fast, but for whatever reason you're not fasting. Then it is required, it's wajib. Definitely in the Hanafi school, I don't know about the rest, but most of them also, the Shafi as well, that you are required to now complete the rest of the day fasting. One example is that someone was traveling and got home and not fasting, and now came home midday. They cannot eat and drink for the rest of the day. Someone who was sick and now by midday they feel better, so now there's no excuse for them not to fast, but now they're required to stay fasting and not eat and drink until the rest of the day. Someone accepted Islam. Is there any converts here? Inshallah. Any? MashaAllah. So if someone became Muslim right midday, they came to the masjid, wow, it's Ramadan, they got so excited, took the shahada. Before having taken the shahada, if they didn't have anything to eat, have them eat first, and then have them take the shahada and tell them after that, you should not eat and drink for the rest of the day. For whatever reason a person is not fasting, and that person is required to fast and has no valid reason. For women also, if their period ends midday, they cannot eat and drink for the rest of the day. So yeah, that's one of the practical. What else? The body, the general body, touching, all of that. Let's go to now the things that do not require. A lot of the questions that he had before, inshallah, some of them will be mentioned there. So eating or drinking something forgetfully. Someone ate and didn't remember, or drink a cup of water, whatever, juice, tea, coffee, right, or with somewhere and ate and drink, and then after that realized, I was fasting. Totally fine. إِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَكَ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاكَ. Allah has fed you and gave you to drink. Enjoy the rest of your day.
When it's sunnah fasting, you break the fast, right?
If you are what?
You're not in Ramadan and you're doing
Any fasting.
any fast?
Yeah, this applies to, in general, it applies to all fasts. These things that I'm going to mention that does not break the fast, that of course, any fast. So even someone who's doing a nafli fast and they ate and drink, they didn't remember because nobody's fasting, of course. And there's a bigger chance to do that in a nafli fasting. So, still fasting. Still good to go. Eating what is between the teeth and is less than a chickpea. I mentioned that. So if it's a chickpea size or bigger, or whatever you think that is a lot, substantial, then that will break the fast. But if it's less, it does not break the fast. Tasting the leftover traces of medication in the mouth or throat, right? After suhoor, totally fine. Dust or smoke, all of those, entering one's throat without one's doing. A mosquito fly or any other object that enters the mouth and goes down the throat, and the person did not intend to do that. Of course, nobody will intend to do that. Swallowing the wetness that remains after washing one's mouth in wudu. So make wudu, you always rinse your mouth, right? There's always something remaining. That's something that you cannot avoid, right? So that's why that's excused, even if your mouth is clean and you feel that there's maybe some wetness, moist of the water in your mouth, totally fine. So after you rinse your mouth in wudu, you don't have to worry about the wetness of the mouth. Swallowing 1 or 2 drops of sweat or tears that enter the mouth and mix with one's saliva. So that's different than someone kind of taking drops and dropping and going straight down to the throat. So that happens because that's something that you cannot avoid when it happens, right? When you're running, doing exercise or whatever, working out, or doing any other, heavy lifting, you start to sweat and sometimes you feel it. I have a good example. I'll pass. Maybe it's not related to a lot of you, so I'm just going to pass. So it happens. So those are the things that you cannot avoid, right? So totally fine. It's fine. Yes, same thing. So when you wash your mouth, it's fine. Oh, your own, that you kind of sniff it and it goes down the throat, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the amount. Yeah. Because it has to be externally entered into the body. It's already there. It has to be externally entered to the body. So like phlegm, right? You talk about phlegm. You're talking about phlegm, right? Yeah, so it doesn't break the fast. Okay. What else? Swallowing one's own saliva. Swallowing one's own phlegm. After cleaning the throat, right? Swallowing vomit. And that happens a lot with, when you eat a lot, right? Sometimes a little bit comes up. That's fine. Deliberately vomiting less than a mouthful. So we said if you're deliberately vomit because you were sick to your stomach and you just stuck your finger in your mouth and got everything out, right? So that's going to break the fast. But if you did that and only a little bit came out, it's not going to break the fast. You're still good to go. Using a miswak or toothbrush. Wetting one's lips with one's saliva. That's totally fine. Swallowing blood that exists from the gums and does not. So it's very, like I mentioned, it was very mild, right? And of course, the last, committing any of the sins, right? It doesn't break the fast. So that's the outward scholars, that's what they're going to, because they give the ruling depending on the outward, right? Al-hukmu ala al-zahir, as they say, the scholars. That the rulings, they always apply on the outward. It's external. But inward things, that's between you and Allah. And who's going to guide you? Who's going to tell you what is wrong and what you shouldn't be doing? The scholars of the inward. So backbiting is a sin, and that's one of the things that we talked about, that staying away from sins is also part of your fasting. So anything that is sinful, it would not break the fast, meaning that you just did the bare minimum, right? You just did the bare minimum. You got away with doing that, and you're good to go. You're not going to be punished for not fasting, but you might be punished for that sin. Okay, I think we can just skip that part. The nose, we already talked about that. The acts that do not break the fast, the eyes, the ears, I think we did all of that. Okay. Really? 1 week? Can I try them? So the body in general. Rubbing oil or cream on the body or hair, in general, is permissible. Just like we said, anything that you inject into the body that does not go through the main GI system, injecting into the body or rubbing over the body, does not break the fast. So it's okay. You shouldn't try to do those things just, because I cannot eat, I'm going to do it. It's called hila, right? You're trying to find an excuse to kind of cut it short. So that would be disliked to do because you're then missing out. Yes, please. Because you are missing out on the objective of the fasting is not to eat and suppress your ego and yourself and your lower self and your nafs, right? Not eating and drinking. Applying deodorant, perform a bath, right, for coolness or for whatever reason. Blood cupping, it's called hajama. You can do that while fasting. As long as you are, in a good shape, and you're not going to faint after that. Because some people actually, healthy people actually faint after cupping. I once almost fell off because I did not cupping actually. I gave blood, I donated blood, and then I had to ride my bike back. And I was fasting. That was the worst thing that I did in my life, I think. One of the worst things. And it was a long ride back home. I almost fainted. I had to stop and get off the bike, and I just kind of laid down on the sidewalk. Some people came, "Oh, what happened?" And that might be okay. But it was really tough. Anyhow, so it is just like if it's going to make you weak. However, blood cupping or donating blood while fasting, it is permissible. And flu shots. And any other, any other medication that you inject, right? Vaccines. And then the mind, intending to break the fast and then not break the fast, does not break the fast. Okay, I think we'll take a short, is it break time? I think we take a short break here, and then we'll come back, and inshallah we're going to go over again. We're going to do a summary of this, of what we mentioned, of the rulings, and then we'll talk about i'tikaf, and then we'll talk about sadaqatul fitr, inshallah. 11:40 sounds good.
Assalamu alaikum. We have some light refreshments and snacks outside. Please feel free to help yourselves. Jazakallah khair. We only have one setup, so maybe we can let the sisters go first, and then the guys can go and grab it. So we'll let the sisters go first, inshallah, and then we can grab it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, so inshallah, we'll go to the summary. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. So in summary, in short, we'll talk about the definitions and some of the other things. So what is the definition of fasting? Is abstaining from eating, drinking, and marital relationship. So entering refers to ingesting anything voluntarily into the GI tract, which includes the mouth, nose, right? And then after that, we have the fasting. That when is it obligatory? Number one, it has to be the month of Ramadan, and it has to be a Muslim. And the Muslim has to be sane, and the Muslim is also mature. So a child does not have to fast. People exempt from fasting. So if a person is sick, for example, someone is pregnant or a nursing woman. So a mom who's nursing a child, breastfeeding a child, is also considered from those who are excused if they are unable to fast and they're feeling that it's going to weaken themselves or is going to weaken the child. So either one who's going to be affected by fasting, that pregnant woman can not fast. A person who is traveling. So in these cases, these people are exempt from fasting. However, they have to make it up if they choose not to fast. Those who are exempt from fasting and also cannot fast is the two situations for women in their menstruation and postnatal bleeding. Okay. Very good question. I purposely did not go into the detail, but if you, since you asked it, inshallah, we'll go through. So a traveler is someone who intends to travel from their home base, from their hometown, and that hometown is their hometown because it's their permanent resident. And they intend to travel for approximately 50 miles or more, and they, after traveling, after leaving their home, they do not intend to stay anywhere for more than 15 days. So there is two aspects of a traveler. One is an active traveler, one is on standby traveler, if you may. So an active traveler is someone who's actually traveling and intends 50 miles or more, right? He's traveling, he's driving, flying, whatever. And then there's the standby traveler, the person who is not at home, not at their permanent residence. They went for a conference, for work, for leisure, for whatever, and they're staying somewhere for less than 15 days after they have already become a traveler, an active traveler. They are still considered a traveler, and they have the choice of not fasting. They will shorten their prayers. So all of those rulings will apply. And now this is the Hanafi school is very lenient, very generous. So if someone is traveling from one place to the other, right? They have plan B, C, D, all the way So they're traveling from here, going to one country, and then from staying there for a couple of days and going to another country, staying there for a couple of days. People have those travel plans. And altogether, that whole travel trip is like 2 months. That whole time, this person will be considered a traveler. All the rulings will apply. Fasting will apply. Praying will apply. And then there's a third category that everyone is a traveler in this world. So that's the ukhrawi traveler. That's the traveler to akhirah. So that will not count because we're talking from the external, from the fiqh, from the rulings of the outward. However, that will be a traveler. So a lot of people think that you have to be active traveler, you have to be actively traveling to be considered a traveler, and after that, if you are staying somewhere, true in some of the other schools, like the Maliki school or the Shafi school has 3 days. So someone went for a 4-day trip and stayed somewhere for 4 days. In other schools, they may not be considered a traveler, but in the Hanafi school, they are still a traveler. Even if they're relaxing onto a hotel and doing whatever, they pray 2 rak'ah. And if it's Ramadan, if it's still inconvenient, they have the choice. If they don't want to fast, no blame. Yes.
Wherever you are, residents, you fast, and you break the fast because of Eid. You're traveling somewhere else, but there's no Eid yet. Is it going to be like you fasting?
So that's a different situation. It's a very good question, but it's not related to the traveling. That's related to wherever you go, even if it's your 31st day, right? But for them, that's their 30th day. You have to fast that 30th, that 31st day of yours. No, it cannot be the other way around. Because it's only 30 days of fasting. But because you started 1 day early, and now you're going to a place where they're completing 30 days, right? And now it's your 31st day. You'll have to fast with them. You cannot say, oh, I'm going to do Eid today by myself. You cannot do that. You have to fast with them. On the flip side, if you are traveling from your hometown where they are only doing 29 days, for example, and now you are in the place where you're going to, they're also doing 29. They're not doing 30th, and they're doing the Eid the next day, but you are already 1 day ahead of them. So it's your 28 days. Now you have to make up 1 day. Because the month of Ramadan has to be 29 or 30. It cannot be 31, it cannot be 28. It has to be, you have to fast at least 29 days. Later on. No, you can't fast the Eid day, after Eid. You make up 1 day.
We didn't talk about age. How about if somebody is elderly, but they're not sick? Are they obligated?
Yes, so unable to fast. Sickness is like one of the reasons. But someone who's unable to fast because of age, so they would pay sadaqat al-fitr for each day that they missed. It can be done early, it can be done during Ramadan, it could be done after Ramadan. That sadaqah, that giving charity can be done anytime. However, if for whatever reason, in a sick person's case, if they get better, and if it's an elderly person but later on they felt better, or when we had fasting in the summer, it was very difficult for elderly people, for people who are unable to fast. But in the winter, they can make up. So if later on, if they're able to make up, and when they're able to make up, they'll have to make up. So the physical fasting will always apply if and whenever that person is able to fast. And the sadaqah that they gave will be a regular charity. What are the things that are recommended? Recommended to eat suhoor. تَسَحَّرُوا فَإِنَّ فِي السُّحُورِ بَرَكَةً. The Prophet ﷺ said that eat suhoor. and there's barakah in the pre-dawn meal. So if someone does not get a chance to have a full meal, even to have a sip of water, inshallah, that will be fulfilling the act of suhoor. Or if someone just doesn't want to eat, they can just have a sip of something, or a piece of bread, or a date, right? Inshallah, that would be very healthy. To delay the pre-dawn meal closer to the time before Fajr. So meaning that it will be recommended to have suhoor at the end of the night. At the end of the night. Not too close that, it becomes like doubtful. Like counting the seconds, countdown. Now they have this prayer, iqamah time, right? You see the countdown. So you should not be going with that countdown, okay? Last second. Same thing with iftar. Maybe give it a minute. Totally fine. So doing iftar early is sunnah, and to do suhoor late, also sunnah, but to keep them at a moderate timing, and not to do it like right on the dot, just to be safe. That would be recommended. To be generous in the month of Ramadan, of course, this is something that we always want to give and should give donations. And in Ramadan, we give our zakat. And if that's what you do in Ramadan, that's how you give your zakat, then try to do more. Always, because those are the obligations, right? Just like you pray your 2 rakat fajr, you pray 2 sunnah before that. You want to maybe add tahajjud or add more nafil. So the minimum is something that you have to do regardless. So it's always good to be a little more generous, more giving, and mashallah, Muslims are generally generous, especially in Ramadan, mashallah. To recite the Quran as much as possible. Right. So because this adhan is throwing me off. Subhanallah, Allah, la ilaha illallah. To recite the Quran in the month of Ramadan, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fi al-Quran. One of the most important or the most significant aspect of Ramadan, aside from just the fasting, is the Quran itself. Because Allah, when He describes the month of Ramadan, He says, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fi al-Quran. When He talks about Laylatul Qadr, inna anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr. Right? The Prophet ﷺ used to go to the Hira to do i'tikaf, basically. And it was not just the Prophet ﷺ used to do that. It was the tradition back in the Quraysh, because they have these 4 sacred months, and then they have those months that you cannot fight, and other months are fighting or doing whatever. And then they wanted something, something special, something that they have a kind of a spiritual kind of retreat. So they will go to Hira. And Hira, that place, that mountain, was known for the people of Quraysh come and spend a few days there. They won't eat and drink, they won't talk to anyone, they won't just do spiritual kind of yoga, right? And, that's how they felt. Because being connected to a supreme power and connected to somehow a metaphysical realm, it's something that every human being by nature desires. That's why a lot of people even come to Islam, they go to all of these different things like yoga and meditation and those kind of things, and go to the mountains and go to to check Buddhism, to check all these other things that have all these things. Like even Hinduism has a lot. And then they come to realize that there's something more special in Islam, because that's the true religion. And then they get to know all these different things. There's fasting, there's these prayers, there's all these meditations where you connect, right? And you disconnect from the materialistic world. So by nature, every human being needs that and feels the need for that. And they find different avenues to kind of fulfill that desire. So back then in the Quraysh, they used to do that. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to Hira, it was kind of a tradition. But he was, mashallah, on a different level. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then blessed him with the Quran. So that was in the month of Ramadan. So Quran is very special to this month. To break the fast of others after sunset, even if only one water gives water, a piece of date, the Prophet ﷺ said that who breaks another person's fast gets the same reward of that person's fast without dismissing the reward. So if someone gives someone, a cup of water or a date or anything to break their fast, however, we overdo this as Muslim communities. I'm not just talking about our community, but in general, the Muslims, they just kill this part. Like, they just go crazy on this. Like, you have to give a whole meal. This reward can be achieved by just giving someone something to break their fast. You don't have to give a whole meal. A whole meal will be generous, mashallah. Can be generous, but it's not contingent to a full meal. You get the reward by just having someone break their fast with something. You don't have to provide a meal. Yeah. I see any thoughts. Allah yarhamna. To perform the purification bath, ghusl, before dawn, if in a state of major ritual impurity. This is something important. A lot of people think that they have to take a shower after the period is over, or after a relationship, or after making it wajib or fard upon a person to take a shower. It is recommended, and it's sunnah, and it's best to do it before the break of dawn. However, if someone started their fast without taking a shower, it's totally fine. It's permissible. However, they have to pray Fajr, and for Fajr they have to take a shower. But you can start your fast in that situation. Like if you got up late and you don't have time for shower, you just have time for suhoor, you can delay it until after suhoor. Have your suhoor. After suhoor, take a shower, pray your Fajr, continue your day. Okay, it is recommended to avoid tasting or chewing something without an excuse, right? Kissing with desire, right? As long as there is a strong control on both sides that they can control themselves. However, if there's that fear, then they should not. They should not, should not get closer to one another. However, that does not break the fast. So it breaks the fast with the actual act. Gathering saliva in the mouth and then when swallowing it, that's something that it's not recommended to do. And then to gargle excessively when making wudu or ghusl for fear of breaking the fast. So we mentioned that while taking a ghusl or making wudu, you should not gargle. If it's a ghusl of janaba, if it's a necessary ghusl that you're taking, rinse your mouth. Try to rinse your mouth before the break of dawn and gargle. But if it's already break of dawn, it's already Fajr time, then you rinse your mouth properly without gargling. Doing things that weaken one while fasting, like cupping, we already talked about that. Or any other things, that activity that will weaken the person, because you have to understand that fasting of Ramadan, or the Ramadan itself, it's a direct act of worship. And other things that are indirectly become act of worship through intentions, we want to kind of minimize them. What does that mean? Direct acts of worship are like prayer, fasting itself, reading Quran, and so on and so forth, giving charity. Other things that become acts of worship through your good intention, it's like going to work, going to school, going to do other chores, and going shopping, bringing food, putting food on the table for your family, cooking food. All right? All of that is also acts of worship, is ibadah, but they're indirect ibadat. It can be done without intention, and it becomes like a regular chore. So we want to minimize that second category and maximize on the first category. So anything that will weaken you, even if you do exercise to get yourself better, and mashallah, actually it's very, very useful and very, very beneficial. If you are in general, if you are in a decent shape, an average healthy person, even doing a good amount of exercise, it's actually very good while fasting. But doing excessive kind of exercise that is just going to weaken you, and instead of now reading Quran, you're just going to want to sleep because you're so tired, exhausted. So that would be not recommended, but if it doesn't change anything, you should exercise, especially after Asr, a little bit of time, if there's enough time that you can then spend after that in reciting the Quran and all that. Exercise is important, especially nowadays that we don't exercise that much, so during Ramadan we should exercise. And inshallah, at the end I was going to mention, but I can mention now, that I want to give you all a challenge, serious challenge. Weight loss challenge. No, we're not going to fast because we want to do weight loss. Fasting is not for weight loss. It's not an exercise for that. But because in Ramadan there's so many different types of, and there's a hadith actually, that the Prophet ﷺ said that شَهْرٌ يُزَادُ فِيهِ رِزْقُ الْمُؤْمِنِ, that the rizq of a believer is increased in this month. And subhanAllah, for the entirety of my life, every Ramadan, the foods that I see in Ramadan, I don't see it outside of Ramadan. I think a lot of you will agree with me on that. Especially if you are in a Muslim community and you attend some of the amazing suhoors and iftars. So sometimes you actually gain weight in Ramadan. So let's do this challenge this Ramadan, inshallah. Let's see how many pounds can we lose, and we have the right guy right here. He's going to, inshallah, create something for that. Weight loss challenge. Eat less. Eat healthy, but eat less. Get the spirit of Ramadan. There's no prize for it because we're not doing it for prizes. Right? Inshallah. Does that sound good? Good challenge? Everybody's on? Okay. Oh. Okay. Some of the advice that I will give, other than that weight loss challenge, maximize reward. So you want to maximize the reward of your fasting and the Ramadan that Allah has blessed you with. Make sure to pray your 5 daily prayers. So that's very, very important. I think one of the most important things that you should be on your to-dos list is to pray. Make sure that you pray your 5 daily prayers on time. Make that a challenge that you want to tick off, inshallah. Make sure that you get 100% on that. Praying all 5 daily prayers. And for the brothers, see how many you can pray in jama'ah at the masjid, inshallah. Or wherever you are, pray salat in jama'ah. Refraining from sins and eyes and mouth and all of those. The things that we talked about from the outward perspective, from the inward perspective, it has to be also a fasting, that we refrain from all these sins. I think this last two, I would say this social media thing is going to be the most challenging and the most difficult one, because now, before it was kind of like a more of a want than a need, but now it's just such a needy thing that now you can't even do Hajj and Umrah without this phone. Can you imagine? Your fard you cannot do without a phone. It's so crazy. And so many things that it's becoming like part and parcel of our day-to-day activity that we cannot even function without them. So that's something that we are challenged with, but how do we navigate that? I think it's by putting some restrictions on your devices. Like, every Ramadan I think about this, but I've never done it. I just can't. To just block all the accounts of social media. Like WhatsApp all the way down to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that. Just shut them off for 1 month. You will be mentally so healthy at the end of Ramadan that, subhanallah.
How are we going to watch your video?
So that's what I think. It's just, no, this is something that I always want to do. I always want to do. But you could. Any other way that you can. I mean, you can get the notifications on YouTube. So, anyhow. I know some of my colleague imams, they actually deleted their WhatsApp account because that was just so much time consuming for no reason. 200 different types of groups you're in, and everybody's wants you to comment and whatever. It is a challenge that we are faced with. Hopefully that there should be one common app that just AIs every other app for you, and you have to do nothing else. Inshallah. Did anybody attend the last night's halaqah? MashaAllah. Talked about AI? How was it? How was it? SubhanAllah. Let those bots take over your life. There's no escape from this technology now we're in. We're stuck. There's no way out. But anyhow, there's ways to kind of navigate. Set a time. I think that's the easiest and the most effective way is to set a time. In the morning at this time, in the afternoon at this time, in the night at this time, khalas. After that, if it's not a matter of life and death, it's okay. It can wait. Because if it's a matter of life and death, someone is going to get that message to you one way or the other. So kind of put some restriction on yourself so you... what else? All right. It is recommended... What is it's not permissible, actually. Recommended to avoid, I think it's important to avoid. I have to change that title. To slander, lying, and laughing, and just backbiting. The pleasure of the senses, right? We talked about that. The medical blooding, or blood donating. You should avoid, Mauli talked about that, if it weakens you. If someone abuses one when you're fasting, then you say, I am fasting. These are the things that is mentioned. I took it from the Reliance of the Traveler of Sheikh Nuh Hamim Keller. طيب. Last but not least, regarding the Ramadan, what are some of the du'as to say? Du'as to say. There are so many du'as. Have a list of du'as and have a material of du'as that you want to practice and do in the month of Ramadan. And that's something that is very important in the month of Ramadan. I think 2 of the times that you want to make sure that you don't miss any day in Ramadan, 2 times. One is the time of tahajjud, time of suhoor. Spend some time in dua. Any time in the later night. Before suhoor, after suhoor, if you have another 10-15 minutes. Spend some time in dua, supplication, dua. Early morning. And the second is iftar time. This is the most difficult one because you're hungry, you smell the nice food, and you just want to get into it, or just break your iftar and do your iftar and pray maghrib and get back. That's like, take out at least 5 minutes before iftar. And let's try to, I want you guys to be the ambassador for the community iftars, inshallah. That 5 minutes before iftar, nobody should be talking. Nobody should be engaging in politics and games, and it can wait. That's a very, very precious time. And the Prophet ﷺ always engaged in ibadah throughout the year, every day of the year, in those 2 times, always. Right? And now it's Ramadan. It's the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accepting your dua. And there's a hadith about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out, especially at the time of iftar, that the dua is accepted. So spend those 5 minutes and try to kind of also, if you're with a gathering, just tell everybody, hey, there's only 5 minutes. Let's make a dua. If nobody's listening, you can say a few things. These du'as that it's mentioned here on this page. Allahumma laka sumtu, wa bika amantu, wa alayka tawakkaltu, wa ala rizqika aftartu, wa nawaitu bisawmi ghadin. You could say that, or bighadin. What is the famous one in Pakistan and India? بِصَوْمِ غَدٍ نَوَيْتُ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ. It's very interesting that they have these like ingrained into the public education also. Like you ask them, what does that mean? It's about intention, I think, something. They don't even know the exact meaning, but they say it. It's very common. I always hear people say it. بِصَوْمِ غَدٍ نَوَيْتُ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ. MashaAllah. So these are good to say them. Say them when you're doing iftar, that you're already intending for tomorrow, because in the Shafi'i school, you have to make intention every single day. And in the Maliki school, one intention for the entire month of Ramadan is sufficient. In the Hanafi school as well, every day make the intention for the next day. Your suhoor is actually the intention, so you don't have to make a separate intention. But if you say it at the time of iftar, then you're good for the next day. Right? It's kind of like a shortcut. So these du'as is just kind of like, it gets you into the zone, right? It gets you kind of like, oh, there's something to say. Like a lot of people just, okay, we already asked for Allah for maghfirah and rahmah, right? Done. But kind of like a reminder. You can also say the short one, Allahumma laka sumtu, or Allah, I fasted for you. وَعَلَى رِزْقِكَ أَفْطَرْتُ, and I'm breaking my fast on the provisions that you have provided me. The first one that I mentioned is a longer one that has reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe in you, right, and so on and so forth. And also, you could do two other du'as that are very common and we should know them. Number one is, Allahumma innaka afuwan tuhibbul afwa fa'fu an. Right, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Aisha radiallahu anha that if you find Laylatul Qadr, say these du'as, say this du'a. And then the second one is shahadatain, shahada, istighfar, asking for Jannah, and seeking refuge from Jahannam. A du'a of four things. So you say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfirullah, as'aluka al-jannah, a'udhu bika min al-nar. So if nobody's paying attention, you just say that a few times. And if people just say Ameen one time after that, inshallah, they'll also be included. So some du'as for you to kind of do if you're in a hurry, have a list of a few, and you can say that, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our du'as that we're going to make, and all the good deed that we're going to make, and all the du'as accepted for us and for the entire Muslim ummah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So now we have another half hour, inshallah. We'll quickly go through i'tikaf and sadaqat al-fitr, inshallah. So those are the two things that are remaining, that are related to the month of Ramadan. What is i'tikaf? I'tikaf is a spiritual retreat that we seclude ourselves in a place of worship, and we do not leave that place without any valid reason. Now in Ramadan, it has to be for the entirety of the 10 days, which is also sunnah. It's not wajib, you don't have to. It's recommended, but again, if you start it, then you have to end it. You have to complete it. Like a rule of thumb, I mentioned that anything that is not necessary, it's not mandatory, Once you start it, you have to complete it. You cannot just leave it in between. So, the mother of the believers, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always perform i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan until he meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For men to do i'tikaf is done in the masjid, in a place that is it is inhabited by people who come for the 5 daily prayers. So that's a Shara'i masjid. And for women, it will be disliked for them to be alone at the masjid by themselves for i'tikaf. So it's recommended for them to do i'tikaf at their homes. The Prophet ﷺ allowed in the beginning, and then after he said, oh, this is getting out of control, and then he stopped. He said, do it at your homes. Because this is something that, it's going to be controversial for sisters. Please bear with me. But it's the true thing. Salat in jama'ah, it's highly recommended in Sunnah al-Mu'akkada. It's kind of near to important for men, and it's not for women. You're not obligated to come. It's not actually highly recommended that you should come and pray Salat in Jama'ah. But if you want to come, and you are here, and you want to pray in Jama'ah, mashallah. Even when you pray at home, and you do not come to the masjid, you get the reward same as the brothers who make all the effort to come and pray in Jama'ah. I say this because a lot of times there's a lot of kids running around in the back. And definitely most certainly their moms are praying salah while their kids are just running around making a lot of noise. So you're already getting the reward of praying salat in jama'ah, and you are already given that excuse, and you don't have to. It will be more important for you to make sure that other people can pray in peace and comfort. Because older people, you have to understand that older people in the community, older folks who are now grandparents, right? Or maybe a little younger. They're not too younger ones, maybe also. Small kids, for them to hear a lot of noise, it becomes very difficult for them, and they become so annoyed because in my almost 2 decades of being an imam, mostly older people come to me and say, can you just tell these parents to keep their children quiet, please? Younger folks who have kids of that similar age, they do not complain. They never complain, hardly ever. So we have to have courtesy for everyone. We have to accommodate everyone. Older people should accommodate those who have little ones, mashallah. But if you have a little one who's going to run around and make a lot of noise during the salah, and you do not pray in jama'ah, and you just make sure that you are with your child, and they're not running around making noise, I am quite certain that you got more reward than praying salat in jama'ah. Does everybody agree with me on that? It makes sense? So I think I want you to be the ambassador again on this, to talk to sisters, to talk to mothers who have little kids who are going, mashallah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Mashallah, although they are listening, subconsciously they are learning a lot, but they're not running around. They have something to do. So creating something, because someone has to oversee them. If you just leave them and say, hey, quiet, don't make noise, 2 seconds later, and kids, that's what they're going to do. That's what they should do. That's what kids do. That's healthy for them. That's how they stay healthy. Allah made them that way. If they're still all the time, they're not going to grow, they're not going to be healthy. So Allah made them that way. So at least during the jama'ah salah, I would really like to see the culture here that people respect the salah, the prayer, especially the congregation. People are praying, we take care of our kids. After the salah, nobody minds, I think, right? But during the salah, I think we need to be mindful. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. The word of the discussion came out of i'tikaf. So for women to pray at their home, you get the same reward. And then for i'tikaf, it's best to do it at home. It's best to do it at home. That's what the Prophet ﷺ's wives did. That's what his family did. That's what the sahabiyat did until this day. But if it's safe for both, for everyone, for her especially, if she wants to come and do i'tikaf in a masjid with other sisters, they can. It's permissible. It's not haram. Afdal is to do it at home. A lot of people say that, I just feel better at the masjid. Yeah, something related to that? I'll come back to this point. Okay, very good. But let me finish this part. A lot of people think that some of the rulings apply to how a person feels. The Sharia, the rulings, they never, there's not one incident where there's a ruling that applies to a person's feelings. Like someone feels like doing something, didn't do it, right? Or feels like not doing something, but still did it. There are two different things. The ruling never applied to a feeling, right? So it's a very interesting thing that, but it hurts our feeling. Or I don't feel like doing something. Feeling has nothing to do. And that's why I mentioned this, I think, in many occasions, that a lot of people, may Allah protect everyone, people leave Islam just because they don't feel like anymore being a Muslim. That has nothing to do with a person's faith, right? It's just a feeling, right? Sometimes you don't feel like praying. It doesn't mean that you don't pray. You still pray. It doesn't change the ruling. So yeah, for women to make i'tikaf. So what are the types of i'tikaf? We'll come to that, inshallah. You emphasize sunnah, the last 10 days of Ramadan. And then there's other recommended. Whenever you come to the masjid, when you enter the masjid, you say, nawaitu sunnat al-i'tikaf. Ma dumtu fi hadha al-masjid, if you want to add that. That I intend to make i'tikaf as long as I'm in the masjid. You are rewarded for that. You are as if you are in perpetual prayer, in perpetual ibadah, as long as you're in the masjid. Even if you're not doing anything, you're just sitting there waiting for salah. You are considered as praying. Here's your answer. A woman can do i'tikaf, best perform at the prayer area of the house. So, if you have a specific place to pray, that you normally pray, more seclusion, more quiet, can be more devoted in your prayer, that's the place where you want to do i'tikaf. And you do not leave that room or that place without any necessary, any need. Right? So that's where you will do i'tikaf. It is disliked to women to perform i'tikaf in the masjid. We already mentioned that. It is not valid for men to perform i'tikaf in in other than the masjid. So a person, for men, just like it is important to pray at the masjid, but if a male wants to do i'tikaf, it can only be done in a masjid. You can go and stay at your home and have a secluded place if you're unable to attend i'tikaf in a masjid. You can do that, but it would just not be a valid sunnah i'tikaf. No. Does that answer your question?
So many of the America or Europe, there is no masjid there.
make a masjid and then make i'tikaf in that masjid. So you designate a place to pray, a musalla or whatever, even your own house, you make it that as your musalla, and then you do i'tikaf there, inshallah, Allah will reward. If there's no masajid, if there's no masjid, then that's the only option you have, inshallah, Allah will reward you. Next. Can one leave the masjid during i'tikaf? You shouldn't leave the masjid without any valid reason. So a valid reason would be using the bathroom. You don't have food, you need to get food, you can go. You need to take a shower because you really need to. It's a need. You can go. So it has to be a valid excuse. Just going out because I need to go to work, I need to go whatever, that will not be valid. Even going out to help someone. I hope this never happens. But if it does happen, it's a problem. The emergency lights go off. You have to exit the building. Fire alarm. I'tikaf gone. How do we know this? It has to be a direct need for a person who's in i'tikaf. Right? Like going to the bathroom, taking a shower, making wudu, etc., etc. These are your own needs. To go and help someone, or for whatever reason, you had to leave the masjid, the i'tikaf is over. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, one time he was in i'tikaf, and this person comes in and he says, I'm in such need, he needs him to come with him and to go and help him with something. He gets up and picks up his shoes and starts walking out of the house. Someone comes and runs up to him and says, "You are in i'tikaf." And he says, "Yeah, I know." And he asked him because it was known that if he leaves the masjid, i'tikaf is going to end. But he says, I'm okay with that. He said, because I heard the Prophet ﷺ saying, whoever goes to fulfill someone's need, he gets the reward of 3 years of i'tikaf. So I'm just going to go. I will make it up later. But you have to make it up. You have to make up the day that you missed. If you broke your sunnah i'tikaf, you have to make it up. And also fast. I'tikaf, the sunnah i'tikaf has to be with fasting. The smell. Is it the fire alarms are going to go off? Anybody in i'tikaf right now? We should be all in i'tikaf. I'tikaf, nafli i'tikaf. Entering the masjid i'tikaf. Yeah. Any? Very good. Everybody should do that. That's a nafli i'tikaf. That's a nafli i'tikaf. But to do the 10-day sunnah i'tikaf, then you have to be at the masjid from the 20th before sunset, because it's going to be the 21st night, that following night, all the way until the maghrib of the last day of fasting. Whether it's 9 days or 10 days, depending. Maghrib. Yeah. After Maghrib Salat, they can leave. Because now it's the first of Shawwal, that first night. Yeah, then you make up those 2 days. You come to the masjid and you do i'tikaf and you fast those 2 days. Any 2 days. That's i'tikaf. If you're able to. If you're not able to ever, inshallah. Allah accept the 8 days. What a person does during i'tikaf, he prays, he recites the Quran, he makes a lot of du'as, speaks of good, and gaining beneficial knowledge. So any of those things you should do, and it's recommended to do. However, if someone does not do anything, just sits quiet and just sleeps, eats, and just prays the 5 fara'id and does does the Taraweeh, and that's it. Inshallah, it's even better than the person who is just doing all of the above, but he's not doing i'tikaf. Because the person in i'tikaf is as if he's in ibadah the whole time. The whole time. That's one of the benefits of doing i'tikaf. A person can eat, drink, sleep, talk, do everything, even do business. You can actually work from your mu'takaf if you work remotely. If you have your laptop and mashallah, you can do your work. You can attend your 8-hour job, mashallah. But you cannot leave physically. But if you have a business, you cannot bring your convenience store. During i'tikaf, it is disliked to believe that remaining silent is a form of worship. Yes, it is, but because I'm already getting it, right? I've already clocked in, I'm going to be paid anyway, so why should I do anything? So that, thinking that's the best way to do it, that would be wrong. Sure. All right. Now let's come to the last part. Inshallah, we'll spend maybe like 10 minutes or so on this. It's 12:41. Since we are not taking Q&A, we already answered, I think, all the questions during the discussion. So, Sadaqat al-Fitr. Sadaqat al-Fitr is a charity that someone gives after the blessing that Allah has blessed of fasting. And now they are going to enjoy and rejoice the moment of Eid. So to also include everyone, right? Inclusive. Our tradition is inclusive. It includes everyone. So the people who fasted the month of Ramadan, and now they want to celebrate Eid, but they don't have the means, then that's one way of including everyone, that the rich people give Sadaqat al-Fitr to the poor people. And the obligation is based on the words of the Prophet ﷺ, pay for each free person and slave, for the mature person and the juveniles. How much? 1/2 measure, sa', right? Sa' in Arabic is a measurement of wheat, and 1 measure sa' of dates. So there are different things that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that you can give a certain amount. However, the minimum is $15. Whenever we say $15, it's very little. It can go up to $60 or something like that. I can't remember the exact amount, because the sa' of dates, it's almost a little more than 7 pounds of dates. That's how much it would be. $15 would be too little, right? So that's about $50 to $60. So if mashallah Allah has given you enough and you can easily give $50 per person, do 50. If you want to do it, make it 100 if you are able to. If you are 4 people, you want to give 400 in Sadaqat al-Fitr, mashallah, the more the better. But the minimum is 15. Minimum. Something that it's unclear sometimes. People think that you can only give $15, you cannot give more. Of course you cannot give less. But you should and try to give more if you can. If you're doing the Sadaqat al-Fitr amount for someone who cannot fast, because we mentioned that if someone cannot fast and they're unable to fast in the future and they want to give their fidya, which is Sadaqat al-Fitr per day, in that case, if it's 30 days, then you could easily take the $15 one, which comes up to 900. Naam? Oh, okay. I think it will come later, but Sadaqat al-Fitr is the same as zakat. So it can be given to the 8 categories, and it's preferred to give it to those who are closer to you in proximity or closer to you in relationship. So let's say you have a relative that is far away, and then you have a poor neighbor. Which one will get preference? The relative, and then the one who's closer to you in proximity. So either one you can do. So anyone who can receive zakat can receive sadaqat al-fitr. So pay for each person, meaning the head of the household will pay per person, per head of the family. So if you are a family of 4 people, family of 8. It's not per head of the household. It's for everyone. And the head of the household is important to make sure that if you are paying for a child that is dependent of yours, right? But they have already reached the age of puberty. They are 15 years old or above, right? Then you should let them know that you're paying on their behalf if they're able to pay. But if they're still dependent and they're not obligated to pay, then you pay on their behalf. But if they're able to, then you should let them know that I'm paying on your behalf, because then they're obligated on their own to pay. Because sometimes, they have a part-time job and they have like savings of $5,000-$6,000. Now they're obligated to pay zakat as well as sadaqat al-fitr. Now if you want to pay on their behalf, you have to let them know. Just like you would pay for sadaqat al-fitr on behalf of anyone else. Right? You have to let them know. You cannot just pay on someone's behalf without letting them know. Yeah. The sadaqat al-fitr is wajib on the one who meets the 2 conditions. That one is a Muslim, and that person is sahib al-nisab, meaning that a person has enough amount of money or savings, or has enough of extra things, that if you put all of it together and calculate the amount, the value of it, it turns out to be 5,000 or more. And that person has to give sadaqat al-fitr, even if they don't have that 5,000 in cash. For example, someone who has $5,000 in cash, regardless of what else they have, minus their current month's need and bills and everything that they pay, 5,000 they have solid cash, right? That person has to pay zakat from that, and cannot take zakat, of course. If you're giving zakat, you cannot take zakat. And then there's a category that does not have to pay zakat, so they don't have any cash, but they have a nice house, a lot of furniture, closets full of clothing, 2 cars in the garage, right? But they don't have any extra cash, no savings, no nothing, no extra money. They're not obligated to pay zakat. But if you take all those extras, that is kind of not an extra furniture and equipment that they never use. They can get by with 1 car, but they have an extra car. Now, all of that together, if you take the value, if they were to sell it on Craigslist or whatever marketplace, what would be the value? If it's 5,000 or more, they're still not obligated to pay zakat, but they cannot receive zakat. So this category and the previous one, they both pay sadaqat al-fitr. Is that clear? Yes.
Can you clarify here? I was asking somebody has like a closet full of clothes and 2 cars and they don't have cash, can they take zakat?
Yeah. So they, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Yeah, they cannot take zakat, but they have to pay sadaqat al-fitr. And they're not obligated to also. They're not obligated to to pay zakat. Pay zakat. Now there's then the rest of the people who don't have extra cash or extra saving, whatever, in form of currency or stocks or whatever that may be, of digital value or any other values, and they don't have any extra things that they don't need, but it values to the nisab, right, $4,000 or $5,000. So they don't have that, but they have they're doing okay. They can receive zakat because they don't have any extra that they don't need, and they're not obligated to pay zakat on, and of course they don't have any other cash, so you can give zakat to them. When it comes to loans, there are two types of loans. One is the immediate loans that they have to pay someone or an entity, like credit card debts is also included. Regular debts that a person owes someone, right, and they're way behind paying their monthly payments. Any of those debts. Car loans, house loans, student loans, those loans will not count. Like you cannot, otherwise then nobody's paying zakat here in America in particular. If they have those loans, they cannot take zakat because they're doing fine, they have extras in their home. Yeah, they don't pay zakat. If they don't have $5,000 or more in cash, right, or equivalent to that of other assets. Yeah. But I don't know what other savings they have. You didn't mention that. They have extras at their home. Do they have extra things that, like I mentioned, that they have extra stuff that they really don't need, but they have it? It's kind of like a luxury, right? So if whatever category they fit, that they have to pay zakat, obviously they cannot receive zakat. Category that they don't have to pay zakat, but they cannot receive zakat. So both ways not going to work. And also, plus they have to pay sadaqatul fitr. The second category. And then you have the poor, that they can receive zakat, they don't have to pay sadaqatul fitr, and of course they don't pay zakat. So it depends on which category they fit in. Most likely, if they're in the second, then they don't pay zakat and they don't receive zakat. Because if they have extras, you sell that and you use it for your need. Because zakat is for the needy people. If you have extra laying around that you don't need, then you don't need it. Yeah. So those are the people who would have to give zakah. The man is required to already pay that. Already did that. From the dawn of Eid, it is therefore not obligatory on a person who died prior to dawn, and also not required for those who are born, right? Because you have to pay on behalf of your child. So if the child was born after the break of dawn, then you don't have to pay sadaqat al-fitr. It's always recommended to give sadaqat al-fitr to the needy people, perhaps maybe right in the beginning of Ramadan. Let's try to give you sadaqat al-fitr right in the beginning, yes.
So I just want to make sure I think I understood that correctly. Because especially about zakat, it's a little bit tricky.
Yes.
You have frozen assets, whether you have extra stuff at home, or you have 401k that is frozen, you cannot touch it. You pay on this, but you don't have the cash. go ahead and take the burden of selling to pay the zakat off these items?
It's a longer discussion. That's why I didn't want to get into any of those retirement stuff. It becomes a little complicated because there are some options where you can actually take it out with penalty and you pay your taxes and all that on, and then whatever remaining is yours. You can do that. And some that you cannot touch it regardless. And some that you are the one who's investing or it's being invested on behalf of you from your employer. All of those variations. So some will not even count as yours. It's as if you don't have it. Some of them, they count as yours and you can take it minus all the penalties and that. So that's the amount that you own and you pay zakat on them, depending on also what kind of stocks they are. Because you don't pay on all the stocks, on the total value of them. There's variations in that. So, but anyhow, if you have 5,000 or more in those, after everything, then whichever category you fit in, then that's how it's going to. What's that?
So you go ahead and sell,
No, you don't sell.
but what if you don't have the cash? That's the question.
You might have to. You might have to.
Okay, that's the question.
You might have to. If you don't have the cash, then you may have to do that. And zakat can be given before Ramadan. It can be done. You can give zakat actually for the next 3-4 years. You can give it way in advance. You can give zakat later. It doesn't matter. It's always best to do it as early as possible, especially for the current year. You should be paid off. But if you have to delay, you can delay. It's not like it doesn't have a specific time that you have to pray like on time. You don't have to pay zakat on time, but it's good to. So for whatever reason, if you need to delay it, it's fine. I think we'll stop over because we need to call the adhan and we need to pray sunnah and then.
One question.
Yes, I haven't finished everything, but I think we'll stop over. Yes, yeah.
I'm going back to the fasting. If somebody is fasting, or you said 60 people we have to feed, right?
Mm.
Is it possible that you can sponsor here one whole group?
Yes.
Can be considered as, because there are a lot of people who don't eat.
So for the kafara,
Rich people, you know.
yeah. So for kafara, you have to fast 60 days. If you're unable to fast, then you feed 60 people. Those 60 people can be anywhere.
Anyway,
Can be local, can be abroad, can be anywhere.
no, but the condition is they have to be needy people, or it can, what is that?
No. Oh, it has to be needy people. إطعام مساكين. It has to be poor. No. Halaqa will not apply. I think we have to put that in the conditions, Ahmad Bhai. Put that in one of the conditions that that this food is not a fidya.
So that is suhoor and iftar, both.
It could be. It's just 2 meals. It could no. You don't make them fast. You fast. You have to fast 60 days, and if you're unable to, then you just feed 60 people. You can give them pizza. You can give them, if they're fasting, you can give them suhoor and iftar. If they're not fasting, in general, meal, just meal. It doesn't have to be suhoor iftar. It can be, like if you're giving to 60 poor people in Ramadan, you could consider suhoor and iftar. But if it's outside of Ramadan, you're going to just give them 2 meals. No, they don't fast. The one who committed that crime is going to fast. Nobody else is going to. Yeah, that's لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. That one does not carry the burden of others. Subhanallah bihamdi. Subhanallah al-azim. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair for everyone who came. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to implement these things that we have learned and make us of those people who beneficial knowledge and that we act upon the beneficial knowledge. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.